Dead by Daylight, we need to have a chat. And what's the best way to start this? Yes. Survivor entitlement. We've all seen and heard the discussions regarding Survivor entitlement recently, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think the discussion has really been getting anywhere. That said, there is something about Survivor entitlement that I feel we need to address, and that is how it relates to what killers are actually, according to survivors, allowed to play. Now, I know that this isn't something that people are going to want to bring up, but I feel like my Steam profile comments really kind of illustrate my point here. You're a joke because you play Knight. Knight, sigh, minus rep, Knight player. Another comment about the fact that I play Knight. No. After they went up against my Knight. Minus rep, spams guards. Minus rep, P100 Knight player. Minus rep, P100 Knight player. Actual POS player just plays Knight. I can keep going, but I think this very much illustrates my point. For those of you who don't know, I am a P100 Knight player. I am also one of the top 10 Knight players worldwide. And I still, in the year 2026, regularly receive death threats and am told to kill myself purely because of my choice of killer main. That's not okay. That is incredibly not okay. The fact of the matter is that survivors feel entitled to go up against what they want to play against. And the killers that they don't want to play against usually are the ones that require a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of game sense in order to counter. Knight is a prime example of this. If you know how to counter Knight, he essentially becomes an M1 killer, and there's really nothing you can do against him. Proper looping, not putting yourself in a corner, knowing where your partners and teammates are, makes him extremely weak. However, the vast majority of Survivor players don't know how to do this. They don't know how because they don't want to learn how. The Knight has been out for over 2 years, and yet there is no meaningful portion. There's no meaningful portion of the game's community that actively knows how to counter him and is able to implement those countermeasures. As a result, he has essentially gained this idea that he is a low skill, low effort killer that relies on AI. But he doesn't. The Knight requires some of the best macro sense in the game to play effectively. And on top of that, he requires you to have a skill set similar to Spirit players in order to potentially maybe get a hit. And that amount of skill is not something that you can just do with your brain off, unless you have literal hundreds of hours playing him. So, what do we do about this? Well, unfortunately, there's not really much we can do about this. The survivor entitlement epidemic has reached a point where survivors are just going to be hand-fed by behavior whatever they want. Even we see this with the new Fast Track rework, which doesn't actually help. It doesn't actually help the fact that Fast Track is busted. And Fast Track isn't busted because of how much generator progress they get. No. Where Fast Track is actually busted is that it fucks with the macro gameplay that a lot of killers use in order to gauge how they're doing in the match. Fast Track essentially reads, in its current version, whenever you unhook a survivor, get a brand new part. That is broken. If you unhook 3 survivors, you get essentially 2 brand new parts. It is completely and utterly survivor-sided. Now, I know people don't like to say that the game is survivor-sided because of the kill rates. But let's be real. Most of the kill rates are due to survivors giving up on Hook, not actually trying to counter, and just going next whenever they encounter a killer they don't like. And the Knight is no different than this. Fun fact, the Knight has an average kill rate of, I believe, something like 40 to 50%. I'll say that again. The Knight has an average kill rate. The Knight, one of the most hated killers in the game, has an average killer rate of maybe 50%. Not even. So why is he hated? Why is it hated so much that survivors who should relatively easily be able to get out of matches against him, why do they hate him? It's because they refuse to learn his counterplay. This is where survivor and killer divide comes from. Killer players have to know how to play survivor. They do. They need to understand how survivors think. They need to understand a survivor's thought process. Survivors don't need to play killer. They don't need to understand how a killer's power works in its entirety. They don't need to understand how macro gameplay works. Why? Because they have perks like Fast Track and DS and Dead Hard and any other of the, quite frankly, dozen second chance perks and meta perks that they can just coast through the game on and be able to, with relative certainty, make it out of the match. And behavior has contributed to this. So how do we fix it? And the answer is, we can't. I genuinely started making this video trying to come up with an actual idea of how we can move forward as a community in a positive way. And the answer is, and the result of me making this video is, I don't think we can. I think it's genuinely gotten to the point where the top tier creators in this space don't want to play Dead by Daylight. The low tier creators don't want to play Dead by Daylight. The casual players who aren't making content don't want to play Dead by Daylight. No one wants to play Dead by Daylight, but we still play it because it is the only asim horror survival game that's actually good. Which is sad. The game is bugged to shit. Killers are getting kill switched for months, for almost months at a time. Survivors are feeling emboldened and entitled because behavior has told them they should be, and has shown them that as the majority of this game, there are literally 80% of the current games in Dead by Daylight going on are being played by survivors. 80%, 4 out of 5 players are survivor players. And that's not just because of, stats this, stats that. That is literally the active games. 4 out of 5 players are survivors. So behavior has to keep them happy. And right now, survivor is the power role. It is very hard to get a win against a coordinated team, regardless of whether or not they're on comms. And then we have B and C and D tier killers. Knight, Skull Merchant. Hell, even killers like Trapper, I've heard people complain about. Killers that are not strong. Objectively, they are not strong. Getting the short end of the stick. because survivors refuse to actually learn the game. And it's disheartening. But with that said, this video is getting kind of long and kind of ranty, so thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one. And if you have any ideas about how to deal with the survivor epidemic and make it so that survivors don't feel fine about telling killer players to kill themselves, it's purely based on the killer they choose to play, let me know. The only thing I could think of is a ranked mode, but honestly, behavior's never going to add a ranked mode. Anyway, this outro has already been super long. Thank you to everyone who watched through to the end, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye.